Kirishima is gentle. Where he put bruises last time, he creases Bakugou's skin as if an apology for leaving them, to the point Bakugou feels he might need to reassure him that their previous night was exactly what he had wanted. What they both had asked for, and there was no reason to say sorry for that. Still, he moves slowly. In the lighting, he admires him. Work-rough hands moving along his thighs, his hips, looking too large in Bakugou's own eyes. It's nice. Kirishima kisses him any time he asks and more. He leaves him gasping, arching up under his every touch as if they had fallen in bed like this more times than they had any right to. He keeps trying to push his way up, to tell Kirishima he too was deserving of letting someone else take control, but Kirishima quiets him with a kiss, with a gentle thumb running over his cheek, lips, neck. He says that Bakugou's done more than enough to deserve an extra present. Even if it feels good, even if Kirishima leaves him breathless, leaves him clinging to the sheets with a sharp cry as he comes, as he's fucked past the point until he feels like he might come again, still soft, just from the feeling of Kirishima and how perfectly he fills him up, stretches him, drives into Bakugou like he's the only thing that matters. There's panic under his skin, bubbling up in his stomach, a feeling of dread that leaves him a little dizzy with the combination of sex and lack of breath. He tries to ignore it, focus solely on the sensation of Kirishima holding him, fingering him, fucking him. It works for a while. He's learned how to keep up pretense as well, even if he's internally falling apart. Kirishima knows nothing of the turmoil going on inside of him, only the high blush on his cheeks and the moans coming from his lips as they finally collapse onto the bed, tangled in the sheets, panting. It's good. Bakugou's body is humming with the afterglow of orgasm, overly warm and sticky in Kirishima's arms as they shift until pillows are beneath their heads and the sheets mostly cover their bodies. And then Kirishima holds him, wraps his arms around Bakugou's waist to pull him in, presses right up against his back and nuzzles into his hair, peppering more kisses at his neck. Everything about it being warm, intimate. Their bodies touch from head to toe without a barrier in the way. He can feel as Kirishima's chest expands at his back, his heart beating, the way his fingertips just brush his stomach, uncaring of how messy they both might be. Good night. Bakugou feels as though he might suffocate if Kirishima holds him any longer. He doesn't move. Good night. As soon as he closes his eyes, he knows what will happen. Bakugou would be an idiot to think otherwise, as though he were good enough to push aside his past trauma like it didn't make up his entire life. Every choice made in a fruitless attempt to do better under the mask of healing. He's a liar. When he wakes up, he's shaking, sitting up in bed already, panting hard as his limbs shake without his command to do so. Sweat beating down his back, his legs stick to the sheets, breathing out of control. Hey. Bakugou feels a hand at his back and immediately twists, slapping it away, and in the process almost tumbles from the bed as he jerks to escape. He catches himself though, still trying to catch his breath, and he stares back at Kirishima, looking with wide eyes at him in the dark. They look worried, scared, lost. Bakugou doubts he looks any better, more wild probably, like an animal trapped in a corner knowing the only thing he could possibly do now is strike out. It's his default. Claw his way out, snap at Kirishima, fight, yell, run. He could, technically. I'm sorry. Kirishima raises his hands, showing that he's not going to attack him. Bakugou wants to scream that he should be the one trying to prove he's not dangerous. I didn't mean to startle you. You were just screaming and thrashing, and I didn't know. It's fine. Bakugou manages to get out. His throat feels raw. It sounds too forced and too harsh, like it's trying to push him away, and right now he's not entirely sure if he actually is or not. It's got nothing to do with you. That's not entirely true, but Bakugou doesn't want to hurt him any more than he already has, than he already will. Pushing him away now would be the easiest thing to do. He throws his legs over the edge of the bed, placing his feet flat on the ground, and starts the process of calming his breath. He counts to 10, quiet under his breath, making sure he's able to hear his own voice, before looking up to call out the furniture in the room. The dresser, the nightstand. There's the door to the living room, the door to the bathroom, the windows with the curtains not perfectly pulled across so he knows it's still fully dark outside. He breathes, runs a hand through his hair to feel himself, takes notice of how the strands feel against his fingers, and when he gets too close to his forehead, the little sharp pain from the cut still healing over. He's awake, fully, knows this. Knows it's just him and Kirishima in the room. Can still feel the hands on him, hear the shots of gunfire, the smoke. Bakugou breathes. He stops shaking. There's nothing else here in the room. No one else but the two of them, and it's okay. He's safe. It takes another 3 minutes for him to lay back down, for him to repeat that he's safe, that no one else is hurt, that no one will be hurt, before he's able to get back under the covers and remind himself not to lay flat on his back.
Sorry,
he says, because Kirishima is still looking at him as if he wants to reach out and help him, but doesn't know how.
It just happens.
Kirishima doesn't touch him, but he does pull the blankets back up so Bakugou's shoulders aren't exposed anymore. Under the blankets is still so warm from Kirishima's body heat, a nice little nest of comfort and darkness that Bakugou has to resist the urge to curl up into and never come out again. Don't worry, Kirishima says with a smile, the best he can do when he's so lost. I just wasn't expecting it to be so bad for you. Are you going to be okay to go back to sleep, or do you want to get up? He wants to help. Kirishima is a fixer, but he doesn't know how to fix this. Bakugou wants to tell him he's sorry again, that he wishes he was that easy to fix.
We should sleep. It's still late.
Kirishima silently agrees, dozing back off slowly, still facing Bakugou just in case. But this time he doesn't touch Bakugou. He doesn't crowd him or hold him, because Bakugou hasn't said anything. He hasn't given him any information for what might help or hurt, and it should be fine, because that's how it's always been after all. Bakugou settles back into the bed without a fuss. He's good at it. He's practiced. In college, he had a roommate, and after the second time it happened, he knew he couldn't keep being so rattled. Rumors would spread. People would talk. Bakugou is the guy who has nightmares so bad he wakes up thrashing, shaking. A tough asshole like that can't handle a little bad dream. He refused. He had to do better. So he learned. He hid it. He forced his body into submission even when he wanted to scream, forced it to stay calm, to lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting backwards from 100 over and over again as his heart raced in his chest. Adrenaline pumping, his body telling him he was in danger, he should run. He needed to protect himself, fight or flight, and yet Bakugou would stay silent, breathe. It was just a stupid fucking nightmare after all. And here he was now, doing the same thing with Kirishima, covering himself up, saying it was fine, turning his back so he didn't have to face him, didn't have to see any looks of concern or pity. He wanted Kirishima to go back to sleep. It was better for him. There was no reason to fret over Bakugou. He's a grown-ass man still scared of the fucking dark. He needs to be better than this. Yet, there's a part inside of him, a small part, that tugs him back and says no. Maybe he didn't have to. Maybe Kirishima deserved better than that. Maybe this time he could learn to be better. Bakugou never really cared about being palatable. He didn't care if people would think he was a complete and utter asshole, refused to be his friend. He didn't need to lower his voice or censor his words. He never wanted to. But it was so much easier having people be angry with you, be fearful, to have them think you were unapproachable and off-putting than pathetic. He could take their little comments about his attitude, but he couldn't take their pity. The way they looked at him like he was something to be coddled, to be protected, to say, "Woe are you," and give him some pitiful little attempt at friendship or smile because they felt sorry. Bakugou could never handle that. He didn't want anyone knowing his weakness. Didn't want anyone to have an excuse for why he was the way he was. He felt whole as he was. He didn't feel like there needed to be a change. Still, he hid. But maybe with Kirishima he wouldn't. Bakugo rolls back over. Even with these movements, he tries to be as silent as possible, to keep himself still, in place, a non-issue. He places a hand against Kirishima's chest, staring at where his fingers touch skin. Unable to move his gaze up to look him in the eyes. Not yet. He can't face him yet.
Ichiro.
Bakugo licks his lips. His throat is so dry, he needs water. His voice is barely audible.
Can I tell you about my nightmares?
He's never, not with someone like this. No one outside of his parents, his therapist. No one has ever known or heard. Some people know the story, but no one really knows the effects. Kirishima's hand covers his own, doesn't move it, just holds. It's so gentle, so intimate, Bakugo can feel his throat close up. If you want, comes the reply. Not pressing, no force, leaving it in the air for Bakugo to still choose.
Yeah.
He breathes, the single word shaky in the dark.
I think I do. I've almost died twice now, when I was younger.
He starts. He isn't looking at Kirishima. He thinks if he actually sees his face, his reactions, he'd chicken out and back off. Right now, his nerves might be frayed, but they're steady enough for him to keep talking. To dig up the past, he tries too hard to forget, so maybe Kirishima might understand some part of himself that no one else does. That even he has a hard time coping with at times, because Bakugo trusts him enough to lay himself bare and pray Kirishima will still be there after, even if it's for a little while. Because this doesn't matter, right? Another 2 days, maybe. That's all they'll have left. He can give Kirishima this at the very least.
In middle school, I nearly drowned. It's part of the nightmares sometimes, but not the majority. It's just that feeling of choking. It's so shitty, because you know it's happening. I didn't pass out. I just couldn't breathe, and every time I tried, it just made everything worse. Inhaling all this water and mud and...
He sighs, pausing long enough to collect himself, tracing a line down Kirishima's shoulder, curving along the muscle, feeling the warmth under his touch.
It took a really long time for someone to help me. I thought for sure I was done for, honestly. But then this stupid idiot Deku came and saved my ass. It's so stupid.
Bystander effect, his therapist once explained. When everyone else sees something terrible happening but thinks someone else will be the one to jump in to help. When everyone thinks, even as they watch, that it's such a tragedy, but not enough for them to do anything, someone else will. Someone of authority, someone more important. Deku was the only one to break it. Him jumping in broke the trance everyone seemed to be in, and before Bakugo actually passed out, lungs full of water, he came back up choking, coughing, dragging horrible wheezing lungfuls of air even as he threw up. People say he was lucky. He was brave. Bakugo always hated it.
I think I should have died then.
Bakugo says in his next breath. Under his hand, Kirishima tenses.
You know all that bullshit about the universe having a plan or some shit. Probably would have been easier just to follow along with that. Think Deku fucked something up by pulling me back up.
Bakugo pauses, giving Kirishima a moment to say something if he wants to, but nothing fills the empty space. Kirishima is giving him the opportunity to say what he wants in his own words without judgment, his own story without interruption.
I'm not a good person.
He starts up once more.
Especially not back then. Deku had no reason to do what he did. I tormented him for years. We grew up together, and as we got older,
He was a piece of shit. A cocky brute of a kid who thought the world revolved around him. He was smart, strong. People praised him near constantly, and it all went to his head. He took it out on Deku, Midoriya, who he saw as weaker than. He was cruel, and still, even now, he doesn't understand why Deku was always so nice to him. Why he forgave him to the point that they're friends now in adulthood, having mended as much as they were able, even if Bakugo still doesn't think he should have been forgiven.
In high school, it just got worse. I got attention, bad attention eventually. Some gang figured I would be a promising new recruit, I was an asshole, but they wanted me to be a certain type of asshole that actually hurt people. Not that I hadn't before, but this was... He swallows down the lump in his throat as he remembers. He didn't think he was such a terrible person until they asked. Said he was just like them. Could really go places if he wanted to with all the spitfire he had boiling up in his guts. It was different. I wasn't like them, like that. I didn't think, at least. Or didn't want to. Unaware of his own actions, or rather unaware of how his actions affected other people, how others perceived them and in turn perceived him. Being praised all his life, being able to get out of any situation unscathed without even thinking about it, coming out on top with no one punishing him for it, it came to a head. It turned sour before he knew it, and suddenly he was looking into the eyes of people who said they understood him. They knew how he felt. Strong, smart, better than anyone else around him. He could be so much better, so much stronger, dangerous. Bakugou's hand curls into a fist against Kirishima's chest, trying to steady his nerves as he remembers. Put enough power behind it that maybe he can edge his trembling away, while at the same time make his skin hard enough that he can't feel how heavy Kirishima's heart lumps behind it. I said no. Told them to fuck off. They kidnapped me. He lets it all out in one breath, just like the singular moment in time it was. He recalls how his therapist always said he didn't have to downplay the event. It happened. It was traumatic, so Bakugou could talk about it like that. Could actually say how it hurt, how he was scared. He was a 15-year-old boy. He's allowed to react like the near child he still was, and that's always been one of the most difficult things for him to accept. It takes him a little while longer to continue, to get all his thoughts straight, to not be so self-destructive for once. Obviously, that wasn't great. But besides just being roughed up, some cuts and bruises, I wasn't really hurt. Not physically, at least. It wasn't like I'd be useful to them dead. They tried to persuade me. Threatened me, threatened my parents, all that bullshit, you know. I still told them to piss off.
How long were you with them? It's the first time Kirishima has said anything since he started talking about all this. His voice is low, level, and Bakugou wonders if he's making it so for his sake. He still can't look him in the eyes.
It took 2 days for the cops to come after them. Find where they were keeping me.
Tied up, dehydrated, hungry. Again, he's told he was lucky, that he was brave. And Bakugou never hated hearing anything more.
It turned into a firefight.
They weren't going to let him go easily. He was supposed to be their promising new recruit. See the world the same way they did and want to tear it down alongside them. Obviously, getting caught, especially in a main headquarters, wasn't part of the plan. Even now, Bakugou tries not to think about it too much. He's talked about it enough with therapists, with his parents, with his teachers that put a hand on his shoulder and said it was okay to not be okay. He was allowed to be hurt, admit that he was hurt, let himself feel that and let it process. He always hated it. There was so much gunfire, so many hands grabbing at him, trying to steal him back or pull him to safety. A fire started, some sort of explosion. Destruction of the city buildings crumbling around everyone, and Bakugou was the one stuck in the middle of it all. He was the reason it happened and the reason why everyone was there. He doesn't realize how silent he has gone until Kirishima touches him, brings him back. It's just a light graze of his cheek, something so soft and hesitant it couldn't have been interpreted as violent. Bakugou tilts his head up and looks. Kirishima is staring back at him with the same type of eyes that have yet to judge him. That gave him space when he asked, that smiled at him, laughed with him. The same eyes that love his friends, his family, and that same look of innocent, open concern that rescued him from a snowstorm, that pulled him from his crushed car with an "Are you all right?" and still look him in the eye when he was an asshole. He's too good. Bakugou doesn't deserve that.
People got hurt. Good people. One of the detectives was seriously injured. Never recovered. Found out that he died 3 days after the fact.
He's crying. He's getting Kirishima's pillows wet. His brain tells him to stop, but his body won't listen.
He died and it was my fault it happened in the first place.
Survivor's guilt, his therapist told him. He couldn't blame himself. The actions of others did not reflect back on who he was. He could not hold the blame for this, but how could he do anything else when he was specifically taken because of who he was? It aided him. The nightmares started up after a few weeks. He did a good job of hiding them, but eventually they came out as the terror and trauma built up. He nearly died twice. He should have just died once.
Talking helped,
says Bakugou, trying to move past it all.
Learned how to process, cope with it, I guess. The nightmares come and go still, but it's been manageable until I'm thrown into situations I can't control or unknowns.
But you still blame yourself. Kirishima interrupts him with no bite behind the words. He wants to understand more than anything. Bakugou moves his hand, his limbs feeling heavy, to pull Kirishima's fingers away from his face, interlace them together to hold.
My entire life after a point has been trying to make amends. I became a firefighter specifically to help people. All we're supposed to do is help people, but it's hard when your intentions are still selfish. I'm still in it for myself, to make myself feel better. Like I said, I'm not a good person.
Kirishima squeezes his hand. I don't think you're a bad person. He doesn't hesitate saying any of those words. Bakugou's not sure if Kirishima is capable of lying, and it hurts. He can feel the tears start to well up again, silently gathering at the corner of his eyes to pull as Kirishima continues. I think you're complicated, like anyone else. I think you're learning and you're trying, which is kind of the only thing we can do, right? So I think that makes you far better than you believe yourself to be. It's okay to be a little selfish sometimes if it means trying to help yourself heal. He's crying, he knows, because Kirishima wipes at his eyes with a gentle swipe of thumb, only helping to spread the wetness across his cheek and clump his eyelashes together. He doesn't mind, because Kirishima doesn't mind him. Bakugou wraps both of his arms around Kirishima's neck, awkward and uncomfortable lying on their sides as they are, but Bakugou needs him close right now. He buries his head into Kirishima's neck, smells the scent of lingering sweat, sex, and the woodsman he's come to learn is solely Kirishima over the past few days. He cries quietly because he's cried so loudly in the past, has screamed and pounded his fists and questioned everything about everything, asking why and let out all the anger, aggression, confusion, and sorrows he's had. He doesn't want that. He doesn't feel anger here. No reason to fight and bite and claw. He's warm, wrapped up in strong arms and worn-out blankets in a handmade cabin way out in the snowy woods. He feels protected, heard. Even with all the torment still rattling around in his head, he feels like he can get it out slow. Let it go with a steady stream of tears because it's not fixed, but it's better. It'll continue to be better.
Thanks.
Bakugou whispers into the damp skin of Kirishima's throat.
For saving me. I don't think I've said that yet.
Kirishima kisses the top of his head, hands rubbing up and down his back, but not letting go. Anytime. They say nothing else. The glow of dawn approaches through the window, but neither are ready to get up. It takes a few more minutes, but eventually they both fall back asleep, lulled into a gentle slumber by the steady breathing of the other and the warmth both of them feel tangled together so close. Bakugou's last thought before he slips back under is one he doesn't think he's ever had before. It doesn't scare him like he might have thought, coming over him so subtly that just for a moment he doesn't understand, but then knows. It's not a lie, not a fluke. Laying here in this man's arms on the cusp of Christmas morning, and just for this moment, this second, he doesn't push it away, doesn't ignore it, embracing it like a warm ember in his palms, not caring of the tender blistering skin or burnt ash that may mar his skin after. He mouths out the words into Kirishima's throat, wondering if his lips can say without the sound. Press it so deep into his pulse that when Kirishima's blood makes it back to his heart, he'll know. And so, Bakugou sleeps. At this moment, he's content with that what if. Will hold the hope close and not think of it going away so quickly. He'll have time to mourn after. Right now, it's okay. He'll sleep.